we're going to see a day, one day, where on ESPN, you'll tune in and watch jiu-jitsu, and you'll tune in and watch sports analysts talk about jiu-jitsu. I mean, I don't, whether it's on ESPN or ESPN 8, I mean, they got the dog racing world championships and the cornhole world championships on ESPN 8. So we deserve to be there. Jiu-jitsu is a legit sport. I think that one day, I don't know a timeline for this, but one day jiu-jitsu will be in schools and you'll be able to get a scholarship to go to do jiu-jitsu in college, in which you'll do 4 years and you'll graduate out of college and you'll get drafted into the professional league called the PGF, you know? I think that there is a route for people to make a career with jiu-jitsu. It hasn't existed before, only for a select few, but I think that the future is very bright for the sport of jiu-jitsu.
Welcome to Forever White Belt. I'm your host, Adolfo Ferranda. Today, we have a very special guest, Keelan Lawyer. Keelan is a jiu-jitsu black belt under Brandon McCaghren at 10th Planet Decatur in Alabama. As many of you know, I'm a huge fan of Brandon's work and consider him to be one of the best instructors in the game today. Keelan, or as Brandon likes to call him, Conscious Keelan, has played a crucial role behind the scenes, helping elevate Brandon's fantastic content. In addition to being responsible for much of the initial filming at 10th Planet Decatur, Keelan is the founder of Subconscious Studios, his media company, and a partner in the PGF, Professional Grappling Federation, alongside Zoltan Bathory from the band Five Finger Death Punch, Heather Grace Gracie, and he's their director of technology. In this conversation, Keelan and I explore his journey in jiu-jitsu, the evolution of 10th Planet Decatur, and the community that Brandon and Lindsay McCaghren have cultivated. We dive into Keelan's path to black belt, his balance between documenting and creating content, and how he's working to expand jiu-jitsu's reach. We also discuss his role in the PGF and how they've successfully adapted a unique format, making it accessible to a wider audience. Finally, we look at the future of jiu-jitsu, including its potential to evolve into a professional sport, complete with scholarships and professional leagues. And with that, I give you Keelan Lawyer.
Keelan, welcome to the show, man.
Thank you for having me.
I've been watching the whole 10th Planet Decatur evolution for, it seems like years and years. And it's just incredible what Brandon and Lindsay McCaghren, the owners of 10th Planet Decatur, have created over there. And you are one of these in the circle of things that have helped bring this thing to the awareness of, I think, on a larger platform. And I recently saw that you were awarded a black belt by Brandon, if that's correct. Is that right?
Yes, sir. It was an honor.
Yeah, congratulations on that. And the circle of people at 10th Planet Decatur, you know, some of the guests we've had on are Brandon, obviously, Lindsay, Matt Scaff, Irish Keith, even though he's in Ireland. But I count him as part of your crew there.
Definitely.
How's the culture been created there, man?
Well, it's evolved over the years. Like when I joined 10th Planet Decatur, like 9 or 10 years ago, it was in the back of a workout gym. So like you would just go join like a membership, like a fitness gym. It had nothing to do with jiu-jitsu. And we just had a room in the back there. And over there in that time, the culture was a bit different. Brandon wasn't even a black belt yet. And he was still learning and on his journey and trying to develop the gym. And so the culture was a bit different. It was a bit more hard-nosed, hard rounds. We're just here to sweat and beat each other up and get better. And over time, it's evolved. And I think a big part of that evolution was Lindsay. You mentioned Lindsay and Matt Scaff. Once Lindsay especially quit her teaching job and started managing the gym full-time, the culture started to shift a bit. And between Brandon and Lindsay, you know, they've been together since high school. They're like high school sweethearts. They're just some of the best people you'll ever meet. And they've cultivated culture around Tempe Decatur that is just, I mean, it's family orientated. Like there's a ton of families with children training, and like you'll find the mom and dad and then the brother and sister kids, like the whole family trains. You know, you'll find that a lot at Tempe Decatur. And so there's a bit of a different vibe, I would say, at Tempe Decatur, where we have world-class technique coming from Brandon, Matt Scaff, and the crew, but there is not a lot of ego. There, like, it's more important to Brandon and Lindsay to have kids and families there that are enjoying their time rather than like having a bunch of competitors be world champions. Like the goal and focus is more on the family. But then we've also got a couple competitors there that are competing on the world class level, like Nakia Jackson, Travis Thomas, and a couple others. So as far as the culture, it's evolved, and now it's my favorite place to train. I've trained at hundreds of gyms around the world, around the country and other countries, and 10th Planet Decatur has a perfect balance of like incredible jiu-jitsu, fun, loving community, family atmosphere, little egos. Like yeah, it's one of my favorite places to train.
Now, tell me, what did your first month of jiu-jitsu look like?
And my first month, I was actually just like working out in that gym, like lifting weights, and I was probably like 185, 190 pounds at the time. And right now I'm only like 170. Like 170 is more my average walking around weight, and 185 was like me eating protein multiple times a day and lifting weights and like trying to be big. And I just seen those guys back there doing their thing. And so I ended up, dropping in one day, met one of Brandon's brown belts at a restaurant, and we were talking about the UFC, watching it at the bar, and he talked me into coming in there. And I was just so sure, because I've been an athlete my whole life, I was strong and in good shape. I was just so sure that I was gonna, the classic story at the beginning, I'm gonna do great. I just see red, bro. And I remember there was a guy named Chuck Mitchell, and he was like 120 pounds soaking wet, and he just beat my ass that day. And I was just obsessed after that. I kept coming back. So my first week was a big ego check of like, hey, yeah, you're strong and an athlete and good at stuff, but none of that matters here. And it was kind of like either are you going to stay? Are you okay with that? Or you just want to quit? Because that's an option too. And yeah, I stayed. I'm not even from Alabama. I lived in Texas growing up. And I was just passing through Alabama, to be honest, helping some family out. I was going to be there for like a month, maybe 2 months if things were taking forever. And in that month, I ended up meeting them and trying out a class just for fun to kind of waste some time. And yeah, I kind of never went back to Texas. I've only been back one time in the last 10 years.
So this evolution of your game, what made you stick with it? Being there and all the way from white belt to black belt, that's a long haul. And as you've mentioned, and we'll get to it too, you've done a lot of traveling as well. And tell me about that process, that arc from like white to black.
Yeah, so at first, I didn't really know what to expect. Honestly, my perception coming into this, I didn't know that Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu was done in the United States. My perspective was that Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu was done in Brazil, and the U.S., like there wasn't Jiu-Jitsu in the U.S. in my perspective. Now, I had watched the UFC before. I was a big fan of the UFC already, so I was aware of Jiu-Jitsu. I just didn't know that it was done in the States. Just no idea that it existed. And so when they told me that it existed over there in this town that I was staying in, that alone was like very surprising, and I was very intrigued already. My mom was actually the biggest UFC fan in our household growing up. We would copy the DVDs from Blockbuster of like UFC 1, UFC 2, and we'd rent them and take them home, and then we'd copy them so that we could watch them forever. And so I remember late nights just rewatching UFC 2 and 3, and like she would point out arm bars and things that Grace Gracie was doing. And so I was super aware of it and intrigued. And the day that I tried it, and that first week, instead of quitting and running away from it being hard, I just got obsessed. Like it was this new thing that I had been interested in my life. And I was good at sports, but I was never a big fan of team sports growing up. Like, if I was the pitcher on our team in baseball and, they hit the ball, my shortstop is supposed to get that out. And if they don't, there's nothing I could do about it. And it's like very frustrating. So team sports was always annoying to me growing up. But I was an athlete. And so when I found this, it was like this individual kind of sport where like you've got a team, but in the competition, it's you, right? It's like up to you. one-on-one kind of. And so I kind of gravitated towards that. And then slowly but surely, like, especially here in Alabama, I didn't know anybody. I didn't have any friends. So that's where I met all my friends, was at the gym, at the jiu-jitsu gym. That's where I spent my free time when I wasn't working or hanging out with the family. That's where I was. And so it was pretty easy to get obsessed and stick with it. And then I started growing pretty quick. Like, I was one of the white and blue belts that would tap upper belts pretty quick, just because I was like an athlete and my body kind of knew some things. Like, whenever you're trying to sweep somebody, some people just fall over, and then some people have really good balance, like just naturally. And so I was always naturally pretty good at certain movements. So I was able to progress quickly, but it kind of worked against me because I could get good and tap people out without actually knowing what I was doing at first. And so Brandon really forced me to like become cerebral about it and like understand what was happening rather than just being an athlete. And that's where the real journey started, I would say, when I just got obsessed with the technique and watching film and stuff like that. And around blue belt, I tore my ACL just denying the sweep when someone was in the reap. And I should have just followed the pressure and got swept or tapped out or whatever, but I was standing firm and it popped my ACL. So that was a big moment in my journey where it was like, do I take a break? Do I keep training? What do I do from here? And I started documenting my ACL recovery on YouTube. And for some reason, my YouTube channel had maybe 60 followers, like literally nothing on the YouTube channel. But for some reason, when I posted that first ACL recovery vlog, it got like 70,000 views on YouTube. And I was like, it was like very surprising. And I was like, okay, like people were commenting and saying, thank you so much. I hope you keep making these videos. That really helped me out, things like that. And so I started making the videos more often. And about a month or two in of making ACL recovery videos and recovering my ACL and stuff, I was like hobbling around with my camera, recording myself doing like recovery rehab stuff. And Brandon was kind of like seeing this happen. And he was like, I see you're making videos and stuff. He was like, you should come over here and make some videos for me. And that was kind of the beginning. It was like, there was the time where I couldn't go to work because I was recovering from the ACL. I couldn't train because I'm recovering from the ACL. And it was like, that gave me something to do that was involved in the sport, and Brandon was appreciative of, and I just started filming for him. A couple months of that, and it was time to go back to work because my ACL was working again and I can walk around. Okay, it's time to go back to work. And Brandon was kind of like, hey, I don't know what you make and what's going on there, but if you continue to film for me, you can definitely train for free, and then we can work on like making some money on top of that. And so that was kind of the beginning where we just started playing around, filming some stuff. I would train for free, and I thought that was insane. I was like, this is so cool. This is the best deal ever. I started filming for a couple buddies, doing some weddings and real estate and, graduation stuff, and just started filming more and more. Brandon invested in some gear. And as my film career was starting to take off, it was mostly jiu-jitsu because like Brandon was the main guy I was filming for. And so it was natural for me to go to the gym every single day or multiple times a day to either film or train or just be involved up there and game plan the next video and stuff. And so by the time I was a purple belt, that's just what my life was, is I go to the gym, meet up with Brandon, we film some stuff, we train, I'll film some rounds and then go home. And then I started developing like the job outside of the gym to where my business is called Subconscious Studios. And we handle lots of local things like real estate, weddings, and stuff like that. So it just kind of grew. And the hobby, like I stopped wanting to be a competitor, which is where it started. Like whenever I was a white belt, I was like, oh, UFC, I'm going to compete. I'm an athlete. I'm young. And then as it evolved into like this filming thing, I realized that I don't necessarily want to compete. I've got kids. Like competing early, like 10 years ago in jiu-jitsu was like, I'm going to have to travel 7 hours and pay $150 to the tournament and pay for a hotel. None of that interests me. And like I said, I got kids and a wife. So I was like, I turned more into a hobby kind of enthusiast. And that's when my relationship with jiu-jitsu just really took off. Like I started enjoying it more than ever because there was no pressure anymore. You know, I was just there because I enjoyed it. And there was no pressure from anyone else because I wasn't competing. I was working. So now I'm like an employee. And then it became like a joke of like, oh, Keelan's just the camera guy. And so at all Brandon's seminars, people will ask him to roll. And he'll be like, yeah, I'll roll in a minute. Why don't you get around with the camera guy or something like that? And, you know, everyone always underestimates the camera guy. And so it became like fun to be a hobbyist again. And traveling the world with Brandon was just so many opportunities, right? Like, who would deny, like, if Brandon asked you, hey, do you want to go tour through Europe, multiple different countries, and do jujitsu? I mean, who would say no, right? And so it kind of turned into things like that. And it made it really easy to stay on the path to the black belt whenever I'm just enjoying life, making money in the industry, making new connections with people and relationships around the world. Like I've got people in like 20 different countries that I'm friends with. It's just been a dream, honestly, to travel the world and do jiu-jitsu with someone who I consider one of my best friends, and Brandon McCaghren. I mean, so it's been easy to stick to it and become a black belt over 10 years because I literally love what I do, you know? I feel blessed to be able to travel, film, train. It's a dream.
You know, I watched your black belt promotion. This fun promotion. I love Brandon's promotions. They're so fun. Number one, I love it when he gives a speech of how much he hates to promote people. It just cracks me up every time. And then secondarily, yours was interesting because you guys were somewhere else. You weren't in Decatur. You were at some other academy. And then he prefaces it. Well, he sneaks the black belt to you. You guys are literally mid-roll, and then he just kind of whips, you know, the black belt out and kind of gives it to you. And he also mentions that you're his, you know, one of his best friends and one of his hardest training partners, and like best training partners. So it is fascinating. What was going through your mind during that moment?
Man, I mean, so much, right? Like, so much is going through the mind that, like, words can't even, like, you can't even form a sentence almost, right? It's like, that's, in the video, I think I said something like, you know, I'm glad that we're not in Decatur, so I don't have to give a speech. Like, I don't even know what I would say because there's so much that you want to say, right? But what was going through my mind is just like the culmination of the journey, right? And we were in Budapest in Hungary, and it was just like on this tour that has nothing to do with jiu-jitsu. Like, it's a tour with Five Finger Death Punch and Metallica, and I'm here working, and Zoltan happens to be part owner in the PGF with us, which is how we're there and why we know him. And so we happen to be doing jiu-jitsu along the tour, but the tour is not for jiu-jitsu. It's like just kind of a passive little side effect of the tour. Yeah, so being in Budapest with a couple of these friends that I've met through this crazy journey, and 10 years in, and I wasn't expecting it at all. And so the surprise of it and just everything was just like so surreal, you know, because I've been doing it for 10 years now. It's, you know, it's like part of you knows that you're almost there, like you're about ready for it. And then part of you is like, am I ready for it? Or like, dang, I'm a black belt now. This is weird. And so, yeah, just speechless. That's what was going through my mind. So much that it's like, it's kind of like when your life flashes before your eyes, right? It's like, it's all happening so quick, and how could you ever describe it? It's like, it's one of those, you know?
Just a reminder to please give us a 5-star review on Apple Music and Spotify, and become a VIP member for only 99 cents a month. Get ad-free episodes at anchor.fm/foreverwhitebelt/subscribe. And check us out on Instagram at Forever White Belt Show. Go buy your Forever White Belt swag at Teespring, teespring.com/forever-white-belt. Check us out on YouTube now at Forever White Belt. Finally, if you ever get to beautiful Northern California, please come roll with us at North Bay Jiu-Jitsu in Marin County, just north of San Francisco. They're amazing instructors, and everyone there are great people. Mention the podcast and get 2 weeks free. Now, you did mention, earlier you were mentioning Five Finger Death Punch and the PGF, right? The evolution of the PGF. Boy, what a change of you know, doing these really cool competitions within the Academy Decatur itself to where it is now, partnering with Five Finger Death Punch, one of the individuals, investors, and where this thing is going. And you've been there for the ride. You sort of touched on it, but what's that been like?
Yeah, so when we started PGF season 1, Brandon had under 30,000 subscribers on YouTube, and now he's over 150, I believe. And so we've grown a lot since season 1, and season 1 was also right in the middle of the pandemic. And so season 1 was just something fun to do with our friends that created YouTube videos. That's literally all it was. But it was based on a really, really good idea that we'd been having for a while. And so over the course of the seasons, like especially season 1 through 5, season 1 through 4, it was different every season. Season 1 was weekly, like a regular season of sports. Season 2 was all in 1 week, but it wasn't live. It was pre-recorded, and then we released it in post-produced episodes. Season 3 was all in 1 week, but it was live. And then season 4 was a quintet style tournament. And season 5 is when we really landed on what we now think of as the PGF. And so season 5, we know how we want to do it. We know the rules. We know how we want to present it. So season 5, we thought of it as a showcase to the UFC. Is what we were thinking. We were like, if we could just make this season 5 as good as possible, then I think the UFC could potentially get involved with some sort of support. And that's when Epic Roll happened to be a sponsor of season 5. They had a team, and Zoltan Bathory is an investor, and I'm sure part owner or whatever in Epic Roll, so he happened to be there that week. And Zoltan is a long-time judo black belt, long-time jiu-jitsu black belt. And so with him being there that week with no expectations, he ended up having such a great time. And the tournament felt like a different thing that he's done before inside the space of jiu-jitsu. And so by day 2 or 3 in season 5, he pulled me and Brandon aside and set us down and was like, all right, what are you guys doing here? What are y'all doing? Why is this in Decatur, Alabama, and not Las Vegas or LA? This is really cool. It feels unique. What's y'all's goals with this? Can I get involved, basically? In which we're like, obviously, we would love for you to get involved. And and then by season 6, by the next season, we're in Las Vegas, partnered with Fight Pass with $100,000 to the winning team, and legends of the sport involved because of Zoltan's woman, Grace Gracie. She's literally a part owner of the PGF, and she's directly linked to the legends, all the Gracie family. Grace Gracie and a couple of the others are on our board of advisors, which just legitimizes the whole thing, right? If you're talking about a jiu-jitsu league, it's one thing if Brandon and Keelan own and run it, but it's another thing if the Gracie family is on the board of advisors and its investors are here and they're partnered with UFC. It just took a whole 180 turn from season 5 to season 6. And then season 6 was a great showcase. I'm a perfectionist and on the production side, so I see all the mistakes. I'm like, we could do so much better, and we are going to do so much better. But season 6 went so good that, it's already been easier to get sponsorships and investments for this season coming around, whether it's selling teams or building apps and stuff like that. The connections and the people that are getting involved now are just, I can feel it snowballing down the hill. And I can definitely see a future where we've created a way for people to consume jiu-jitsu that doesn't exist and that is like the way. If you think about like the NBA, 80% of the fans that are in the stadium of an NBA game, they don't play basketball. They're just fans. And then they go to work and then they go raise their kids or family or whatever. But jiu-jitsu is the opposite. 80% at least of the fans in the stands participate actively in jiu-jitsu. And so we have to find a way as a niche, as a sport of jiu-jitsu, to reach the people that don't do jiu-jitsu. It's obvious that we can get the jujitsu people to watch, but can we get all the people that do not train jujitsu and honestly probably won't? Can we make them watch and keep them entertained and make them feel like, they want to follow along? And I think that we've really found a way to do that with the PGF just because of the format that it's in. It allows for things to happen over time, for you to build attachments to players or teams, to get involved in the fantasy league and draft your own team. Major League Soccer around the world, like everyone's familiar with a team sport where the teams get drafted and then they play in a season, and then if they do good enough, they make the playoffs, and then it's single elimination until the championship, So like that format is very familiar for fans, especially sports fans. And so by adapting jujitsu to that, I think we've tapped into a bit of the gamification of the sport for the fans, which to gamify it can create things like the sports broadcast, like SportsCenter and ESPN. Like if the sport can't have sports radio surrounding it, then it won't succeed in my mind. So giving this as an option has been game changer. Like our friends that compete, they're like, my mom, she watches my competitions, but she's not a fan, but she's a fan of the PGF. Like she accidentally got into it and she drafted a team and like she's all in on the format. So I think we've tapped into something special with the PGF just because of the format.
So Keelan, going back to your jiu-jitsu, how would you categorize your jiu-jitsu?
I like the aggressive kind of style. I can be, and there's a time for that, but like generally my style is the counter striker. I like wrestling, but I'm not gonna wrestle with you like at the beginning. Like when we slap and bump, if it's our first time rolling, I'm the guy that pulls guard and like plays defense at first. I want to enter with soft grips. I don't want to like get a grip and just like hold, I'm a very soft player. I like movement and the chess of jujitsu. I don't love the hard nose like fight of MMA, if that makes sense. And so my style is more counter striker kind of lets you work, and my defense is so good that I'll let you play whatever offense you want, attack, attack, attack. I'll defend, defend, defend until I switch the position, and then now I'm on offense, and then I'll slowly and methodically work my way towards the finish. And so if I was describing myself, I'm very soft. Like everyone that I've ever trained with that's like a higher belt level person is like, oh, dude, I loved rolling with you. That was fun. I'm more of, I mentioned it earlier, like the hobbyist rather than competitor. So I'm not here to like show you how great I am. I'm just here to like do jujitsu and have fun and express myself inside this art. And that's why Brandon, he kind of touched on it in that promotion video, but me and him are just each other's favorite training partners because we could roll 20 rounds with each other back to back to back to back, not get tired because we're not competing hardcore with each other. We're just like playing the chess game of jujitsu, and like that. So my style reflects that quite a bit.
Can you give me like an aha moment in your jiu-jitsu journey?
Two come to mind. Number one is when I tore my ACL. That was a big Y in the road where, I could have easily went left or right after that. And, each one would have given me different things. But I remember thinking, why? Like, why? How did it happen? How did I tear it? Why did I tear it? And like, I mentioned it earlier, but it was inside of a reap. And all I had to do was follow the pressure, either get swept or get tapped. It was very simple. And instead, I didn't, and I tried to fight it, and I ended up having a torn ACL and being out for 6 to 9 months, and that was a big deal. And I learned a lot from that of like the ego inside me was like young athlete, don't get swept, but it was obviously like I should have just gotten swept. And so when I was thinking about this and coming back into jiu-jitsu, I was a different grappler after that. I wasn't afraid to tap out or get swept. It's like my ego got pushed down quite a bit after that. And that was so good for my jiu-jitsu. It allowed me to relax a bit and not have to fight the sweep all the time. Like sometimes it's okay to get swept, you know? Like sometimes actually that's the best choice is to get swept, like in the scheme of things. So that was huge, tearing my ACL, like the injury itself. And I've seen this in a couple of other people along the way where they deal with an injury and it forever changes their jujitsu for the better. If you're any good, it should do that, you know? It should make you better for it. So that was a big deal. And then the other one that pops out in my mind was a Nathan Orchard seminar. I don't even remember what belt I was, maybe purple belt. And I just remember he was teaching this very interesting stuff. He's done it, I think, in like the combat jujitsu. He calls it like the reverse gut wrench. Anyways, it's this like north-south variation, and like he's got some game off of it. And anyways, it's very unique and not a lot of people are doing it. And so he was trying to explain it. And I just remember hearing him talk about it. And there was this quote in there, and like it's kind of a joke now at the gym, but he said, you know, think about a tree. Why is a tree a tree? Like, who decided to call it a tree? Is a tree like, does the tree know that it's called a tree? And he just started going philosophical about this. And he was talking about the color of the sky, and like he just went on this like rant of like philosophy and why to stay open-minded, I guess, in like these techniques and stuff. And I remember that was like a moment where I was like, dang, you know, there's not really any rules. Like we are all kind of just making this shit up as we go. And it's like it gave me the freedom to keep being myself. So if I want to go left when everyone else is going right, dude, that's okay. And I bet I find something over here. That was like a big moment in my journey as well.
Now, you might have touched on it, but can you tell me a time that you considered quitting and why?
Yeah, so before I even tore my ACL, like when I was a white belt, there was a moment I had probably been training for 8 months, 6 to 8 months, and something happened. I can't remember if it was like a rib or it was some minor injury. Definitely no surgery. No, it was just a minor injury. But it was one of those injuries that takes you off the mats for a week. And after that week, I like took another week. Even though I could have went back after my week off, I took another week. And so it had been 2 weeks at this point. And then there's like this thing that happens mentally where it's like if you procrastinate, then like somehow you just keep procrastinating. And there was like, and all of a sudden it had been like a month and a half maybe, and I hadn't been back to training. And it was all because of that simple little 1 week, you know, rib injury or whatever it was. And it got to a point where it was like I'd started inching closer to like not training for 4 months, call it. And I'd only been training for 6 to 8 months. And now it's almost been the same amount of time that I'm not training as I was training. And so it was like this moment of like, I really had to make a conscious decision to go back and go in and do it again. A couple of the other guys had gotten better in that 3 or 4 months that I took off. And so that was super annoying. And like, yeah, there was like that moment where it's like before I had gotten just totally obsessed, where I knew I enjoyed it, but it was like it was still hard and I was still losing and stuff like that. And then I got hurt and I was like, okay, you know, maybe that was it. It was kind of like, I guess, my subconscious. Once I finally made my way back because of a friend that was like, hey, what the heck, man, you got to come back and train. Once I finally made my way back, that was pretty much my last break, you know, in the last 10 years.
Can you tell me like your fondest memory?
Fondest memory. I mean, I've got a couple with my children, so I have quite a few little fond memories of those sweet little things. But if we're thinking jujitsu, man, Brandon, we've had a couple conversations over the years where, you know, things happen, you know, whether it's like European tour, PGF taking off and getting investors and getting deals with Fight Pass. And like, there's like been times where we sit down and we just like take it all in and just take a moment to be truly appreciative of where we're at and what we've done and accomplished. And there's been some conversations with Brandon where, you know, we're just so thankful for each other, you know, because I couldn't be doing what I'm doing without him. and he couldn't be doing what he's doing without me. It's like a very mutually beneficial relationship that we're both extremely passionate about. And so the love that I get from Brandon, I mean, a lot of people know him online and they know that he's a good guy, but I can tell you firsthand, like he loves people, like he's a good dude. Like as much as you could be a human that doesn't sin, he's like pretty close, dude. Like such a good dude. And so there's been some moments of just like gratitude and appreciation between me and Brandon through the years that's like definitely fond memories, and I hold those dear to my heart. I wouldn't be where I'm at without Brandon. So there's been some moments between him and I.
What I find so interesting about you is you've tried all these things and you've succeeded pushing along, and of course we don't see a lot of the the mistakes or the self-doubts and things like that. But what I don't hear from you is ever this thing like, even with the video work and everything you've done, is like, I'm not qualified to do this. You know what I mean? I'm not qualified to start a company. I'm not qualified to shoot this wedding or this particular competition or whatever. Does that ever run through your mind, or you just seem to be pushing through, through life and just kind of surfing the wave?
Yeah, there's been a couple moments that I would call a bit of like that imposter syndrome of like, I don't deserve this, or could I film this or whatever, like you said. But I think for the most part, I mean, from when I was a child, like I remember having a thought in grade school of like, man, my parents, they didn't ask to be born either. Like I remember just popping up and living some life, and like all of a sudden I exist and like I'm trying to figure things out. And my parents, they just popped up and started living a life. Like they didn't ask their mom to birth them either. And that just goes on and on. Like nobody, all humans, you and I and anyone else watching this video, you just popped up and started living a life. You didn't plan this. And so we're just figuring this out as we go. And like somebody along the way made some rules, and they were no more qualified to make rules than I am. Like people decide to do things every day. And so I just have this like perception that we're all the same. Like no one is any better or worse or unique or special. Like we're literally all the same. And so like nobody knows what we're doing here. Nobody knows what we're supposed to be doing here. We're just figuring stuff out. And so I take that perception into my life, and it's like I just kind of think of stuff that I want to do, and then I go do it. It's like there's nothing, in theory, there's nothing that's stopping me from doing anything. I could literally, you name it, and I could go do that thing. And that may not be true, right? As I test it out, I may not be as good at this thing that I initially thought, and maybe you got to practice more or whatever, you kind of address it as it comes. But in my mind, yeah, I mean, anything that's ever been done was done by somebody just like me. And so why can't I do whatever I want? And especially in this day and age with the internet, like whenever I have a question, I have this thing called Google that I can go and ask and figure out some different perspectives on that answer. And none of them may be correct, but they give me somewhere to start, right? And so with filming, for example, when Brandon asked if I could do some videos for him, I immediately was like, oh, well, I got to learn how to do videos better or learn how to edit better. And instead of going to school or doing some qualification program for this, I just asked the internet and slowly but surely learned and did a whole bunch of bad videos so that eventually I could make a good video, trial and error. And yeah, I mean, if I don't know how to do something, then I'm going to find someone who does know how to do that thing, whether it's on the internet or in real life. And I'm just going to try and learn from them and then give it a shot. That's just kind of like who I am inside. So I've never really had an issue with like, oh man, I'm working with the UFC's platform and I'm streaming to Fight Pass, and are we going to be able to do good? Like, it's just another thing that we're doing, Being a black belt now, it's like Brandon mentioned the other day, he was like, oh yeah, I could get you a seminar over there. And I was like, oh dang, forgot that I'm a black belt now. And like, I'm like qualified to like teach jujitsu for real. But it's like I've been doing that. Like I could have taught a seminar, 2, 3 years ago, and it may not be as good, but it's like there's a percentage of people that would definitely learn from whatever you have to offer. Even if you're a blue belt, like you could teach a seminar to white belts and they would think you're a god, right? It's like there's like levels of understanding all across the games and the boards. And so, yeah, I just never really cared for like a real solid resume as much as someone that's like just willing to give it a real good effort, right? Brandon calls it hiring samurai. So he didn't hire a videographer, he hired a samurai. And I'm a samurai, and whatever you give me as a task, I'm going to do it to the best of my ability. So it doesn't matter if it's building chairs or teaching jujitsu or filming content. Like whatever you give me as my task, I'm going to treat it like a samurai and I'm going to do it to the best of my possible ability. And so that's more important than being a videographer or being a speaker or whatever,
You mentioned teaching. Have you done much teaching?
Yeah, so I started teaching, I guess, a bit when I was a blue belt. Different like fitness kickboxing classes or movement classes because I was always like connected to the movement of the body. Even if I didn't know how it applied to jujitsu, I was like into calisthenics, like handstands and functional fitness and things like that. So I started teaching classes like that pretty early, like around blue belt. Started teaching jujitsu technique around purple belt, and then off and on since then. Not as much in the past 2 years because I've just been so dedicated to like the film journey. But I did start teaching jujitsu purple belt, and it's funny. Like I was traveling back and forth to Birmingham, which is like an hour from Decatur, and I was filming for Ironclad Headquarters, which is a wrestling gym here in Alabama. They've just got some incredible athletes, but what's special about them is the guy that owns and runs it, he's got a jujitsu mind that has been applied to wrestling. So they learn it differently, they think about it differently, they connect things differently than your average wrestling school. So it was really cool and easy to learn there. But I was filming for them. I was filming for his online program, and I was accidentally learning wrestling through this process, right? And I would learn and film the wrestling techniques, and I would go back to Decatur and I would grab a couple people. Nakaya Jackson was my main training partner for this. And we just started drilling wrestling. And 6 months of this, all of a sudden, Nakaya and myself were known as the wrestlers. People were talking about us like, oh, yeah, if you want to learn wrestling, go talk to them. And it was kind of funny because I'd never wrestled in school, and neither did Nakaya. And if you watch her competitions, people literally think she was a collegiate wrestler. But we just drilled some ironclad methods for a couple months. And so, anyways, fast forward, myself and Nakaya's wrestling had come along so far that the gym as a whole needed to kind of catch up to like know some wrestling. And then I found myself teaching wrestling classes at the jiu-jitsu gym for a while, a couple weeks. We have like month-long curriculums where like we kind of focus on something for a month at a time. And so anytime it's wrestling month, I find myself out there teaching jiu-jitsu guys how to wrestle a little bit.
Now you've had the honor of and just the great luck to witness probably one of the best instructors in my opinion, Brandon McCaghren. What makes a great instructor?
So a lot of people, whenever they're trying to convey an idea or principle, they want to sound smart. So they use some of the biggest words and the most complex ways to convey an idea. I think what Brandon does is the opposite, which is actually what makes him a genius. Is he can take the most complex idea, get it to you in a very simple way. And that's a spark of genius, if you ask me. I mean, being able to convey a complex idea in a very simple way that's special. And that's what Brandon's able to do. His southern draw of like communication and language, keeps him from using these crazy big words that you gotta look up in the dictionary. He's a very simple man, but he's also well read. He's read lots of books. He's got like a theology degree, and he was like a youth minister for years, and like his ability to like use metaphors and stories to help convey principles and ideas is very good as well. And so it's just a perfect mixture of this guy that is truly obsessed and will as much as there is to know about something. So like if there's some vocabulary inside jiu-jitsu or some new move that people are doing or some meta or some like old move that hasn't been around for 30 years but somebody just happened to hit it in a competition, like he's very aware, he's very knowledgeable as much as anyone else on the planet. And then he's able to communicate with stories and metaphors because of his youth minister experience. And then he happens to be from Alabama where he's speaking very simply. And so it's just a perfect kind of storm of like a great communicator, a great teacher and instructor.
It's amazing. Yeah. That's what I really do appreciate about his greatness in terms of delivering information is in such a succinct way. You know what I mean? It's like other instructors, we know who they are. They can be really verbose and, go on and on about the intricate details about things. And hey, more power to them. A lot of people love to learn that way. I'm not one of those people. I tune out quick. You know what I mean? So when I stumbled upon Brandon and the content that you've created with them as well, I was like, oh, thank goodness. Finally, we have a highly effective delivery, and the packaging itself too of this whole thing is just so nice that it's really, I think it's a huge benefit to the community. And I know myself, I've gained so much from it. So thank you as well. And I hope that reflects correctly on Brandon.
Yeah, for sure. I think it kind of started with those 1 minute jiu-jitsu hacks, right? It was like, how can I convey this idea, principle, technique, whatever it is, that's maybe really complex in less than a minute? And so he started like forming how to be short and sweet with it.
Your thoughts on the future of jiu-jitsu?
Yeah, so we're at an interesting time here. 2024 was pretty crazy. I mean, between the PGF announcing the $100,000 prize at the beginning of the year, and then Zapatero announcing their $100,000 prize, and then Craig Jones Invitational coming in with $1 million and disrupting ADCC. 2024 has been the biggest year in the history of jiu-jitsu, I would say. And we're coming off the back of previously the biggest year of jiu-jitsu in the history, right? The last ADCC where Gordon faced Andre Galvao. I mean, that was the biggest thing in jiu-jitsu history, right? And so back to back to back, like the last couple years have just been incredible for the evolution of the sport of jiu-jitsu. And so the future of jiu-jitsu, what I predict, is more of the same. I think that what Craig Jones is doing is elevating the sport tremendously. The awareness, the potential sponsors, the athletes getting paid, the entertainment value of like the beef thing. It's like, it's just so good for the sport. And so I think that it's going to continue to snowball. I mean, this may be a biased opinion, but I think the PGF is going to spearhead the way. I think that as the UFC realizes what we're doing, they're going to buy into it more and more and like help us do certain things. We've gotten a couple of sponsors that are going to make a game changer, a big deal. It's going to be a big deal whenever we get to announce this, and like the assistance that they're able to offer. It's their first time being involved, and so after they get a taste of what's to come with this upcoming season, I just know that they're going to double down. That's something that's unique about the PGF, is every season our sponsors and investors want more, We haven't had the sponsorship that they're like, oh, I don't feel like I got anything out of that. It's always been really beneficial. So I think that the PGF is going to continue to grow and introduce the entertainment consumable format of jiu-jitsu to the masses that do not train jiu-jitsu and will not train jiu-jitsu, because that's who our target has to be. We've already found out how to entertain jiu-jitsu guys. Turns out it's not that hard. You just make two people fight. People will watch it. But how do we entertain the masses? And so I think over the next couple years, we're going to keep honing in on that. I think with the UFC and MMA continuing to grow, the UFC is about to do a new deal with their streaming rights and stuff. So that's going to affect a lot. It's going to trickle down depending on who they decide to partner with and, what kind of money is behind that. And I think that we're going to see one day, where on ESPN, you'll tune in and watch jiu-jitsu, and you'll tune in and watch sports analysts talk about jiu-jitsu. I mean, whether it's on ESPN or ESPN 8, I mean, they got the dog racing world championships and the cornhole world championships on ESPN 8. So we deserve to be there. Jiu-jitsu is a legit sport. I think that one day, I don't know a timeline for this, but one day jiu-jitsu will be in schools and you'll be able to get a scholarship to go to do jiu-jitsu in college, in which you'll do 4 years and you'll graduate out of college and you'll get drafted into the professional league called the PGF. I think that there is a route for people to make a career with jiu-jitsu. It hasn't existed before, only for a select few, but I think that the future is very bright for the sport of jiu-jitsu.
Now, with the amount of focus and effort that's going into the PGF, will we see any more sort of work things being added to things like the BMAC Academy, the YouTube channel, Brandon's YouTube channel, etc.? I mean, we do see some videos, but I'm curious about that.
Yeah, so Brandon's website, man, I wish I could drop some news, but I don't know if he's announced it yet, so I'm not gonna say it. But I will say he's making an addition. Maybe even I could say he's joining forces with someone that's gonna make a big difference on his online academy. It's gonna offer X the value, and yeah, so his website, yes, big changes coming very soon, already in the works. So you can look forward to that. And as far as like the PGF, there's a couple of changes that we're making. A couple of those are just in like, the whole goal with the PGF is to make an entertaining thing and get these athletes paid. Like, we want every athlete to get paid is like the original goal with this thing. Because we believe that these athletes should be treated as professional athletes, and the community doesn't quite get treated like professional athletes. So we're making a couple more changes to continue the evolution of that idea. We want, again, these athletes to get paid, not just if they win. The winner has traditionally gotten paid. We're trying to get the dude that gets drafted last and is going to lose every match. We want him to get paid too, because he's there being a professional athlete. So a couple changes there, a couple changes like in venue, like for the in-house stuff, like with the mats and like certain little minor changes. Nothing's really going to change totally like the way it's viewed or consumed or played out. Everything's going to stay pretty close to the same. Now that we're kind of like landing on what we think of as the format. And but these guys, Zoltan and Grace Gracie and all these other people involved, the sky's the limit for them. You mentioned earlier, like, do you ever get like, nervous, like, oh, can we do this? Can we do that? Zoltan doesn't. That guy wants to take over the world. And him and Brandon get together and they just start laying out the path to world domination, So, I mean, there's been, nothing's set in stone, nothing's confirmed, but there's been talks of taking this to the Burj Khalifa in Dubai and getting certain people involved. It's just, it could go so many different ways. So, yeah, I don't know. Are things changing? Absolutely. What does that look like? Yet to be determined.
Yeah, we'll see. Wow, exciting times with you, man. And I've always been so curious, at least from my curiosity, who's this guy behind the camera, because there's not a lot out there about you, and I'm glad that we got some of it out there. In fact, you mentioned like the ACL injury too. I remember seeing a video where Brandon was doing it a part of his academy. I think he was showing some particular move, maybe in the leg lock instructional type of stuff he has. And he mentions the reap, and he's like, the one reason you can get injured like this, in fact, it happened to the guy behind the camera right here. And he references you and that exact thing. So yeah, that was very interesting to get that context too. So where can we get more information about you and everything you're up to?
So Instagram and Facebook is like what I use the most, and I'm Conscious Keelan on pretty much all the platforms, even YouTube and stuff like that. I haven't added much to YouTube in the last like year or two, other than family stuff. Like if you want to see my kids open presents on Christmas, it's there. But Instagram, Facebook, Conscious Keelan, and then you'll honestly see more me on Brandon's page than my own page, probably. Yeah.
Keelan, also, I'd be remiss if I didn't ask you, how'd you get the name Conscious Keelan? I've always been curious about that. I know Brandon's really good at coming up with these things.
That one came with me from Texas when I was in high school. I was in high school. I was obsessed. I am obsessed with like physics and quantum physics and psychedelics and consciousness and like reality and things like that. And so it stemmed from there. I even have like the Schrodinger equation tattooed on me. So I'm like definitely obsessed with, I'm a sciencey kind of guy. The universe is cool to me. And so there was a moment in my senior year of high school where I basically dropped out in my mind. I was like, all right, screw school. But I came to school with this binder and these books of like quantum physics for dummies and like notes that I was taking. And so people just in school started calling me Conscious Keelan back in my senior year. And it just kind of stuck with me after that.
And you got Subconscious Studios. Is that still happening, or?
Yeah, that's still a thing. That's my media production company, and it's mainly local, but I mean, at this point, we shoot things all around the world. I mean, technically, that's the entity that's working for Five Finger Death Punch, and that's the entity that's producing the PGF is Subconscious Studios. So that's going good too, and that name as well stemmed from the consciousness and subconsciousness, and I was doing a lot of jiu-jitsu at that time, so I love the idea of making someone unconscious and just kind of played it into the name.
Well, thank you so much for your time, and thanks everyone for watching and listening out there. I am your host, Adolfo Ferranda. Consider becoming a VIP member. Check out our swag at, teespring.com/forever-white-belt. And Keelan, again, it's been a real pleasure, and I'm so happy I got to meet you, and thank you for making the time, and I hope we can do it again in the future someday.
Yes, sir. Thank you for having me. I would be definitely down to do another one, but I hope to meet you in person one day.
Yeah, I hope so as well. All right, everyone. Thank you so much. We'll see you guys next time.